Hey, how you doing today?
How you doing? Good, good, good.
How you making it over there on the West Coast?
Doing well, doing well. You know, it's a little hot, got fans going, but tonight's a little cool, so I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it.
Yes. Which part of California? Are you in Los Angeles at UCLA?
Los Angeles, yeah, Los Angeles,
Okay.
California. Yep, in Los Angeles, California.
Funny thing is, I've traveled so many places, but Los Angeles is one of the places I've never been. When I was looking at PhD programs, I came to California. I looked at UC Santa Barbara, UC San Diego. I've never been to Los Angeles.
Well, you know, you've come close. Santa Barbara is actually a very beautiful, beautiful campus.
Yeah.
I wish I had went there. It's you know, the engineering department is right across from the beach, so that would have been a wonderful temptation on a daily basis. So it was good. I didn't go, but I wish I would have went. San Diego is also nice, but LA is a good place, man. LA is a good place.
Well, would you count Claremont as Los Angeles?
That's too much. That's way inland. That's actually in the Riverside County, actually.
Okay, because
I think it is.
I did visit Claremont because that was one of the PhD programs I got accepted into. And when they told me, they were like, it's the land of trees and PhDs, and it's like 30 minutes from Hollywood.
30 minutes, I don't know what they're telling you. It might be 30 minutes at 2 a.m., but every other time, it's that you call that one an hour. It's an hour drive.
Oh no, I get it. That's one of those. It tells you it's 30 minutes through map time, but through street time, you gotta double it.
Actually, in California, we don't say places by distance. We say places by how long it'll take you to get there. So for instance, I used to go to UCLA. Was about 7 miles from my house, where I'm at right now. When I was going to UCLA on campus, it took me an hour to 45 minutes to an hour to get there.
Oh wow!
In the morning.
I get it. We do the same thing here. It's like I don't say my house is 86 miles from New Orleans. I say, oh yeah, it's gonna take me about an hour and a half to get there. So I get it. But so I'm gonna ask you a question, and this is how we start off all podcasts. If you could have anything right now, anything, it could be tangible, it could be a dream, it could be something simple. What would you take? What would you have?
It's a good question. Let me think about it for a little bit. Anything that I would have right now. You know what? It wouldn't be for myself, but I guess if you go with the climate that we're in, it would just be for people to have respect for each other regardless of different opinions. I think if I was to ask for anything right now, because as far as personal wise, I think though I have aspirations and all these different goals that I want to get, God has pretty much blessed me with the things that I think are vital till today. And I'm sure he will continue to do that. But if I was to ask for anything that's like a dream or something like that, I would ask for mutual respect between people, regardless of background and different ideas and ideology, because that's essentially what we're missing right now. That's what we're missing. So it would be great to have that, and that would actually solve quite a bit. I'm not going to say it's going to solve all the problems, but it would help quite a bit. At least people can actually have conversations. But yeah,
no, I get it. Mutual respect does seem like something. Like I guess people would normally say, I pray for world peace.
Yeah,
but I think mutual respect is a good way, a good happy medium to say, if people respected each other's cultures, backgrounds, ideologies, etc., we would be able to have simpler conversations and have more outcome driven conversations.
Yes.
So I think that's great. So for all the listeners, we're on the Things Fall Apart podcast with Dr. Chukwuebuka Nweke. Did I say that correctly? Oh,
pretty close. So it was better than most people. So let's put it that way. It's better than most.
Okay. What is the exact pronunciation? Make sure people say it right.
So the exact pronunciation is Chukwuebuka Nweke.
Chukwuebuka
Nweke.
Chukwuebuka Nweke.
That was pretty good. That was very, very good, actually. That was really good.
Okay, yeah. I'm trying.
No. I appreciate it. That was good.
I'm super happy to have you here. So number one, we have to let the people know that you're the first guest here. So basically, that means you're the case study, you're the premier, you're basically like the Christopher Columbus of the Things Fall Apart podcast. Now, I just hope that there's no genocide and stuff that comes with
Nah,
this.
man. Instead of using Christopher Columbus, let's use George Washington Carver. We got the
Okay,
peanut butter. You know what I'm
we
saying?
can use George
Yeah,
Washington Carver.
yeah. We
I
can
like
use
that. I like that. I
G.W.
like
Carver.
that.
Yeah.
So it's great off that first question that I asked you. You said you would want mutual respect between people. And number one, I think that's very profound of you to say that, because a lot of people will only think about individual myopic type of things. Like, I want to be rich, I want to be famous, or like I said, those overarching things like I pray for world peace, but I think mutual respect is a good place to go there. And considering the year that we've been through, and number one, it's only August, but
Yeah.
considering the year that we've been through in tandem with the last 3 years of this presidency that we've been going through, how has your year been going? Has it been going well? I know you have a wife, you have a daughter, you're a postdoctoral research fellow, so your life is obviously busy. But understandably, as a Black man living in America, there are things that can compound that busyness.
Yeah. This year has been very, very interesting, and I'll put it in this way. The journey that I've been on in life till now has been a journey of, if I would like to self-classify it, of persistence and perseverance.
Mm-hmm.
So this year, so I don't get too much of a tangent, this year has been a very interesting year, and I repeat that because, unlike other years, you would expect that, with this craziness that we're going through from all sides and all topics, that things would be pretty bleak in all regards. But just as in many things in life, oftentimes things come in tandem, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this year, and I'll go through a very quick rendition of it. This year started off decently, let me not say decent, started off wonderful, because for the longest time, my wife and I were trying to have a child, and we finally had one October 2019. And our child came a week before my birthday and 3 days before my wife's birthday. So it was a wonderful birthday gift, Christmas gift and everything. So we were joyous, but also very anxious because, we have a newborn and we want to make sure that she's doing really well. So that blessing was pretty much it was like our high going into 2019. So we're like, oh snap, this is going to be crazy, but we're scared because we have a daughter now. I got to figure out my lifestyle. I got to start my career, X, Y, and Z. So I was in the process of making moves anyways to try and initiate my career, because being a postdoc is nice, but that's not a career. You have to move on from postdoc. So at the time when my daughter was born out, my postdoctorate status was a little bit shaky because funding issues. You have to get lucky enough. My advisors were very, very generous, and let me not say generous, very resourceful, and they were able to find funding for me to stay on longer. So January hit. I was able to go to Georgia Tech for the Focus Fellows. That was great. As exposure to faculty. That's been my goal, was to go faculty. And then I gave talks at conferences, and I give more talks at conferences. And then as I was giving my last talk at conferences, which was in San Diego in the beginning of March, that's when the COVID stuff hit pretty hard. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I had an interview for a faculty job at Utah. And unfortunately, the COVID messed it up and canceled that all away. So that kind of went down the drain. At the same time, my postdoctoral extension was going to last until June. So I had to hurry up and get ready so that I can figure out my life. At the same time, I had to get a job, right? So I started looking for industry jobs because faculty wasn't working. Though faculty is a dream, faculty wasn't working. So I reached back into my network and I got a faculty job. At the same time, I was finishing my research and I started getting published, because that was a big gap in my situation. So this year has been very productive. Overall, if you count the last 12 months of my life, it's actually a very crazy story. That's why I say this year is interesting compared to other years, because last year I broke my leg
wow.
in playing basketball. So I broke it in a bunch of places. I have 11 screws in my foot. So my left foot has 11 screws in it. I'm barely walking now. You know, I just got to the point where I might be able to start jogging. I haven't ran or jogged in over a year. And then at the same time, my wife was pregnant. We had our daughter, and then I needed to get my faculty stuff in line. That didn't work out, but I got an industry job, which I'm at right now. So it's been interesting here. So blessings have been coming in tandem with the trials. So I will say this year has been a year of movement. That's the best way to put it, right? And the reason why I say movement rather than progress is because things are happening, good and bad, right? So overall we're moving, right? The good is that, you know, my career in life is taking shape. You know, I'm an engineer. I'm an engineer now in industry, and then unfortunately we've had all this crazy political stuff happen. But the good thing about it is that this political stuff happening right now, in the midst of the COVID stuff that happened, kind of shines light on the blemishes we have as a nation. Yeah. So a lot of people are taking advantage of it, which is good. You got to talk about the causes of the Black community in every sector, not just police brutality, but also in academics, in finances, social statuses, everything that ties back to the equality standpoint. And this is similar to what happened back with Emmett Till. Emmett Till was the catalyst that kind of initiated, which was already ongoing movement that now pushed forward for us to get a little bit some progress and move out of segregation. So these things I foresee a future for us that's going in a good direction. Hopefully this election this year, which in my opinion is one of the most important elections that we've ever been through, goes in a way that benefits the country in the best possible way, which means, you know, in my opinion, and I don't like to be political, which means that we have to vote for a new president because the current one has not done a good job.
Okay, no, I totally get that. And I think it was nice the way that you explained your life in the middle of this time right here, because as you said, you described it as moving. And that's also a way that I've actually described my life here recently, because as you said, I got engaged at the beginning of the year. That was great. I didn't lose my job due to COVID. I wasn't laid off or anything. My fiance has been able to get her work done in her PhD program, her internships, her fellowships, etc. I've been able to be published in some non-academic journal articles and stuff like that. So it's an interesting situation where you have all of these things going on around you, but technically your life is moving. And I've often had to look at, and I always tell my students this: everyone has to be able to understand their privilege. Everyone has to be able to look into a situation and say, you know what, in this situation, I may not be the person that is suffering. And I always have to give the disclaimer. Yes, I am a cisgender heterosexual Black male, and I experience oppression. But because of my place in society, I also have the ability to be an oppressor. So I think it's great the way you describe that by saying that your life is moving, because it's profound that you mentioned Emmett Till, and now we think about George Floyd, and we think about Ahmaud Arbery, and we think about Breonna Taylor. Of course, arrest the cops that murdered Breonna Taylor.
Yep.
You know, and so we have these, and it's kind of like a powder keg. The world has exploded in a way. I remember Angela Davis saying in an interview that she thought revolution was coming in 1969, like the year right after King was murdered. She's like, everything is setting up where the revolution is coming. And she's now out on the streets and she sees everything that goes on social media. And she's like, well, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the revolution. And I think it goes into one of those ideological conversations, because I always ask people, and people think I'm being facetious, but I'm really not. It's an honest question. When do you think revolution is coming? And I look at that in the guise of the conversation, like we'll talk about defunding the police. And I was like, I agree with that. I can see us defunding the police, moving funds to other sectors to make sure we can lower some of the inequities that exist in society. And then my question is, until that happens, what are we gonna do?
Yeah.
And as you said, the first step that we have to take right now is we need a new president.
Yeah. Actually, so just to touch back on that very quickly, and not by any means, I'm not a political expert.
Yes.
I'm a regular guy who
just play one on TV.
No. I'm just a regular guy who essentially speaks what he sees, right? So the presidency is all well and said, right? So, we know that seat needs to likely be changed, right? Or not likely, definitely be changed. But the most important aspect of this whole situation, and this has been a bell that I've been ringing for a couple of years now, and I think I realized it firsthand. I think it was before the 2016 election. It was because of my close friend I told you that's up north. The local elections are actually the most important elections, in my opinion. Whether it's city, state, those two, in my opinion, are in my opinion, as important, or if not even more important than the federal presidency election. The reason why is because the bureaucracy at the federal level, I think is a level separated from us as the city-state membership, right? And I don't use city-state in the definition of city, but I'm using the city and the state. So in that sense, I believe that the immediate governance and the immediate contributions that we see politically occur at the city and the state level. So if we want to make these changes that we hope to make, we have to vote for the right AGs, the right deputy AGs, the right mayors, the right House of Reps in the sense of our cities, the right assemblyman, assemblywoman, the right representative, everything, right? Those midterms and those other elections are so vitally important because these are the people who are supposed to be represented for us in the federal level. This is why people are complaining about the electoral votes. The electoral votes is established the way it was established. Some people say it's outdated. Some people say it's fine. I don't have an opinion on that specifically because I haven't looked into it too much. But I would say that if we can make sure that at the local level we are fine, then we won't have to worry about that stuff. The gerrymandering, the all that stuff happens because the city and state level you have a representative in that place that does not support your specific goals. Right? And I'll use the example of what's happening recently. So, for instance, in Florida, that you saw, I don't know if you saw that the lady who got essentially voted in Florida as I don't know if it's a senator or whatever, who's a crazy conspiracy theorist, and so she's actually, in my opinion, based on on the rhetoric I saw on Twitter, she's worse than Trump.
Yeah.
But she gained power and she got voted in even without the platform to do, because she was banned from Twitter, she was banned from Facebook, and she still won. That shows that those local elections are vitally important because now that she's in the seat, now she will be dictating the voice of the whole community that she represents.
Yeah.
Those are big deals for me. So I think the presidency, yes, needs to change, but we need to focus more so on our local elections because whoever is in the presidency, that's all fine and dandy. But the people who affect us directly is our state and local people. Your state government is important. Your mayor is important. Like I said, AGs are important because those are the ones that are prosecuting. If you want to talk about prison reform, it's not going to happen from the federal level. It's going to happen from the state level because every state has their own rules on how they dictate their prison stuff. They have their own AGs, right? It's when we get the state stuff that we can go to the Supreme Court and argue something because now we have the backing, right? These things are very important. And I know you know all this stuff because you're very familiar. So the local elections are very important. The federal ones are all equally important because of overall, but the locals are just as important. So I think we need to focus our energy on that every time. But in this case, we do need to vote. You need to vote the right way this time, not like 2016. But overall, I think that's where we need to go in that sense. And I think, but I'm not saying I think, I hope that we do that this time.
Yeah, I can speak from experience. One thing that we know is election turnout is always highest when it's attached to a national election.
Yes.
I know for experience in Baton Rouge, as it pertains to midterms, our election turnout is normally between 17 and 19% of the
Wow.
entire state electorate.
Wow.
17 to 19%. Now, when you go into a presidential election, which this year is going to be interesting due to COVID and due to voter suppression, especially mail ballots and stuff like that, it's gonna be interesting to look at. But previously, I can go back to 2016. Our presidential election still may have 35 to 40% turnout.
That's really poor. That's really bad.
It's really poor, and I can't speak for other states. I can only speak for Louisiana. Like you mentioned, mass incarceration. We're just like in the last 2 years, no longer at the capital. We're now number 3, and I believe Oklahoma has become number 1. But Louisiana was mass incarceration capital of the world basically for a good 10 to 15-year period. But we aren't turning out in those elections for local government. But even like I said, presidential election, even if you go on the high end and say 40%, that's still 60% of the electorate that isn't going to vote at all. And that's not counting the voter suppression that has happened through that mass incarceration system or gerrymandering and all of those different things. So I'm in total agreement with you there. I'm in total agreement. So at this point in time, we can just hope that we can, get together, we can get people out and actually do what we need to do, because in November, it's not just going to be a presidential election. Yes, that's kind of like the main event. That's the Mike Tyson, Buster Douglas of the card. But honestly, we need to go out for those lower level fights. We need to go out for the flyweights, the welterweights, because those things are just as important. And listen, as a political science professor, trying to get even students to understand the importance.
It's
I know one thing is people have been trying to do research on how can we use social media, specifically Twitter, as a basis for voter mobilization, voter education.
Yeah, that's interesting. What were you saying?
I was saying you really can't measure the turnout, the mobilization from social media, because just because someone tweets hashtag Black Lives Matter or hashtag defund the police, whatever it is, that doesn't mean that they're going to go to the polls.
Yeah, so there's a book that I'm reading. I read a couple of books, or not necessarily read. I listen to a lot of audiobooks. Mm-hmm. The most recent audiobook that I'm actually very into right now is 48 Laws of Power.
Okay, yeah. Classic.
Very classic. I think it's a must read for pretty much anybody going in. If you're going into college, maybe not as you go into college, but somewhere within your. I wish I had read that book as a sophomore in college. That would be perfect.
Going into that junior year where you're now your main course classes.
Yeah.
And you're about to go into the real world. That's the time to read it.
Yeah, that's the perfect time to read it. So, in the 40 Laws of Power, there's a section, I think it's Law 40 or 42, whatever it is, that talks about the ability. I don't know what they call the specific law in general, but it is essentially the way to describe it is that you want to maintain symbiosis or symbiotic beliefs with the orthodox, with the norm, but you can think what you want to think, mm-hmm. right? And you don't have to reveal what you're thinking, even if it's different. You can act like you are accepting of the norms. So that goes to what you're saying. This is that just because somebody tweets that Black Lives Matter, just because somebody does XYZ in public, does not mean that they believe that in private. Yeah. That's actually the danger, or not the danger, or the issue with social media. And this is the positive and negative of progressive evolution of society. We now have access to information more than we've ever had in history of life. We are now more connected than ever we have in history of life. We now have access to all kinds of things more than we ever in history of life. But with that, it's a double-edged sword. When you open the floodgates, the fishes come, and so do the sharks. Yeah. So we now have more capabilities of hackers. We have now reached the age, and this is what I call the age of misinformation. Mm-hmm. That's actually, if we were to describe this era that we're going into right now, this is the age of misinformation. So much so that even people who have PhDs can be easily led astray from false data, bad links or bad sources, or just overall lies or misrepresentation of statistics.
Yes.
These are dangerous things because prior to the social media avenue, things have to be vetted. Mm-hmm. Now, whoever is doing the vetting is the one that's the bottleneck for the control. So if that person doesn't have integrity, then the whole thing falls apart. But now everybody has a microphone and a pedestal via Twitter. Yeah. So that's why you see all these bots saying, people arguing online on Twitter, and I see it all the time. It's very toxic. Somebody puts in a post and you see all these bots come and bring the devil's advocate, or they're trying to play down or trying to rile up certain masses or certain groups, and it's very effective. It's actually very, and people don't understand. This is almost like this is an age-old battle tactic: divide and conquer. Mm-hmm. It's never failed. It's never failed. Divide and conquer has been a tactic that has worked for millions, or I would never say millions, for eons. It's been going since the beginning of time. Division has been the way, whether it's in the Bible, whether it's in the Quran, whether it's in evolution of science. Division has always been the way to get ahead if you were the opposition. So I think we have to be very careful, because all the goals and plans that we aspire to achieve, it's almost like now we have to plan 5 steps, 6 steps ahead just to counter all the nonsense that's going to come. So when you mentioned the fact of trying to get voter outcome from Twitter, it's a wonderful idea, but you have to be careful, because now when you open those gates, you're going to let in the people who are opposing you as well. And mm-hmm. they're going to have ways of getting. So we have to find an efficient way, because you're never going to get rid of them. Yeah. You just have to find an efficient way to minimize, and I'm not saying negate, but minimize their effect while maximizing our goal. That I don't have the answer to. I don't have the answer. But I hope somebody figures it out. I just don't have the answer.
Just looking at the hashtag Black Lives Matter, and then those hashtags that are in contest of it, All Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter. It's an exact point of what you're saying. It allows everyone to have that voice, that opinion, no matter what they're saying. And that's where we start to get into issues of collective action. As you said, just divide and conquer is age old. It's since the beginning of time. And I always tell people this: the American political system has issues. It does. And if the people could come together, a lot of the power that is used against us,
we can use for us.
We can then have that power and use it to make sure everyone has the equity that we seek. But
yes.
Divide and conquer through races, through religion, through genders, through sexuality,
finances, all that.
All these different things, we can never come together. And I always think about how people say, like even we can go back to 2016, people were like, well, poor whites have more in common with like poor blacks than they do wealthy whites. And why don't they vote this? They're voting against their interests. But it's simple divide and conquer, as you mentioned. But we're going to come back to that one. And I think our conversation is going to lead back to it in an organic way. So I have a question for you, and you're going to think it's the most simple question of all time. But I've just realized this recently that people don't necessarily understand what I'm going to ask. You are an engineer. I think your specification is geotechnical, right?
Yes.
But just on the surface, exactly what is an engineer? Oh,
so the job, or if I want to say the duty of an engineer is, and again, this is I think at its most basic level, is a problem solver.
Problem solver, okay.
We are a problem solver. So our goal is to see an obstacle that pertains to, whether it pertains to livelihood, security, whatever you want to call it, right? Our job is to look at that and figure out a solution or a way to mitigate any problems or maximize any benefit. That is the job of an engineer.
So that sounds like, and I always wonder how people get to where they are, like their career specifically. Like I know for me, the goal was originally I wanted to go to law school and be a lawyer. But eventually, it was literally my graduating semester. I was like, law school isn't for me. I'm going to go the PhD route. But the thing is, I always knew that political science was where my heart lay, because back in the day, political science was the only way, really. Unless you might go to, every once in a while, you go to business, go to English, but political science was the vehicle to get you to law school and to be a lawyer or a politician.
Yeah.
Think about how you just explained engineering, where you look at problem solving and you look at an obstacle and you try to come up with a solution. Basically, that's how a lot of people look at life. And so in thinking about that definition, how exactly did you get here? Like, what was your upbringing to say, I want to be an engineer? How did that get you to, UCLA, etc.?
Okay, that was a good question. So I'm gonna try and keep the story concise and not ramble too much. But first and foremost, you can say that I was born into engineering. My father was an engineer. Like I said, my father's a civil engineer as well. So growing up, I was fortunate to have the privilege to have him be a representation of something that I could potentially be.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, and this goes for everybody, a lot of times you can only be what you see or what you know, right? And that's not the full case. There can be cases where somebody could be born and inspired to be something else that they've never has seen, but those are rare occurrences. Most people want to be things that they've seen or been in contact or know of or been in some kind of mixed with. Yeah. So my dad was a civil engineer, so fortunately for me, engineering has been kind of a norm in my life. So again, this is the benefits of having representation, and many kids in the inner cities, in the urban population, typically don't have that for many reasons that can be included, countless things we can talk about.
Quick side, where are you from?
I'm from Nigeria. So I was born in Nigeria, and I came here when I was 12, which again, it's that is another privilege that you have, right? Being from a foreign country where you leave your country and you come to a better place than your country was to essentially get a better opportunity. That we can talk about that in a different time. But back to my story with regards to my journey with regards to engineering. So my dad was an engineer. So growing up, my dad would take me to the construction sites because my dad also owned his own business, his own consulting firm. So not only was he an engineer, he was an entrepreneur. So that's another privilege that I was able to see somebody work for themselves and not necessarily work for other person. And my mother was also an entrepreneur because she was a businesswoman who owned shops. Where she sold goods. She was a merchant who sold goods. So both my parents are entrepreneurs. So I was fortunate to have that vision and that example. So that's essentially what sparked the pursuit of engineering. And many of my family members were also educated, so I was very lucky in that sense. And as we spoke about before the podcast, education is that foundation that essentially sets you up to get the golden ticket. Not necessarily that education is the golden ticket, but it sets you up to get that ticket. So because of my parents' background, I was able to have the example, also being of African descent. A lot of things, education is kind of pushed to the forefront. Education. So all that coupled together kind of set me up to go into engineering. Now, when I came to the U.S., because and I'll give the example in Nigeria, things are very hierarchical when it comes to education.
Okay.
So in the sense that in Nigeria, people who are smart are the cool guys. And everybody knows who's smart because at the end of the semester or end of the school year, they post everybody's performance for everybody to see. So who's first, who's second, third, who came last in the class. And typically, if you're the last in the class, people are going to shun at you. You're going to get made fun of. The girls are not going to like you. So essentially, your goal was to be the smart dude in the class because the girls at that time associated that with success. Like, this guy's going to be successful. He's smart. So Nigeria was all about being the best in class. If you were the last in class, you were a loser because you were dumb. So that's the way it was in Nigeria. When you come over here to the U.S., it's almost flip-flopped, right? Where when I came here when I was in middle school, it was almost flip-flopped to where, the smart guys are the losers. And the ones who don't really care so much for intelligence are the ones that are cool. I'm like, oh, snap. So, that was a very shocking revelation. So I had to, as a child, you have to adapt. Also, middle school is a dangerous place to come in when you come from another country. That's the most worst place. Kids are evil. That's a different topic we talk about another time. But so as a middle schooler, I had to adapt because shoot, I didn't want to be in the outside looking in. So, you know, I started to kind of try and move away from my intelligence and downplay that, right? And focus more on trying to be cool, you know, get into Jordans and the Jordan outfits, trying to play all the sports and do all this stuff, which was great because I think what that did was, luckily for me, it rounded me out because I was still school was also, I was naturally good at school because of the upbringing and all that stuff. But I was, you know, trying to do all these different things. So throughout high school, you know, I dabbled in many things and I wasn't necessarily too focused on school, unfortunately. I would say, you know, though the result came out the way I guess it would be if I put the effort, but I didn't focus on school. I was more focused on basketball, trying to make it to the league, more focused on music. I was so split-headed. I was focused on music, trying to get to rap game. And this was back in 2000, and, you know, between 2005, 6, 7, you know, at that time it was everybody, you know, that it wasn't like now, you know, back then you have to hustle, you have to make beats, all this stuff. You know, now we got all the social media platforms. We didn't have that back then. We had SoundCloud, not SoundCloud. We had, there's this thing, I forgot what it was. It was another platform we had. I think it was SoundCloud. We had to put it in. You had to pay for it. Either way, so I was focused on that. So it wasn't until I got back into college that I understood, okay, man, we got to make this work because it's the real world. You got to get the money. So when I got into college, lucky enough in high school, I still did good enough to get into a pretty decent school, UC Davis. Well, not say decent, good school, UC Davis. So I got in as a civil engineer, and I was fortunate to get there, work, you know, go through the motions of school. Lucky enough to go there at the time with my best friend, so it wasn't like I had any kind of separation anxiety from home. My best friend from high school was there with me, and my cousin was there as well. So it was almost like going to college. It was like, okay, it wasn't a batch, and I was fortunate for that situation. But I went to college, and I was fortunate enough to, and that's where, you know, my motto came in. So, and I know this is getting kind of long, but I wanted to explain this specifically. One of my mottos is essentially, or I don't want to say a motto. It wasn't a motto back then, but it was something I did regardless, and I understood what it was later. Was when things become bleak and you don't necessarily know what to do, just put your best foot forward. Mm-hmm. So that's when college. I was always doing that throughout life, and in college I kind of did that, and I was fortunate to work at a research lab, which in geotech is the best research lab you can go to in the country. Because Davis had again, this is circumstance. Davis had a place called the Center for Geotechnical Modeling, which housed a 9-meter centrifuge. It's a 30-foot long thing that spins around really fast and creates gravity so you can scale stuff. So I was able to work there for 2 years. And from there, I got into Berkeley. Didn't think I was going to get into Berkeley. I had a 3.3 GPA. But I had all the other criteria to meet, and I got into Berkeley for a master's, and I stayed for the PhD because I got funding. Crazy story about that. Got funding to stay and stayed on for the PhD. And then after I got the PhD, came down to UCLA. Another crazy situation. In between all these transitions were, like I said, persistent. Like I said, my life has been a life of persistent. There's always been trials, you know. So transitioning from grad school from undergrad to grad school, I wasn't the greatest of students. You know, I was smart, but it didn't show very well because of high school was difficult, so I didn't have the background. So I struggled in college a little bit. Again, I know my one skill set that I do have is I know how to work, mm-hmm. and I know how to not necessarily say work. I know how to persevere and struggle to progress. That's kind of like my niche. You know, that's my when people talk about what's their specialty, what are you good at? I'm very good at in the word hustling. I'm very good at hustling. So I hustle. That's what hustling is. I hustle very well. So I got into, so when going between grad school, I was able to hustle my way, making connections with, bolstering, essentially exemplifying my strengths, which is my social skills, my intelligence, or my perception of intelligence. And I was able to get professors to write me good recommendations. I was able to work at a research lab and get into Berkeley, which is the #1 school of civil engineering in the world. So I got there, and when I got there, throughout my PhD, things were difficult. You know, I had situations where the advisor I had was transitioning out of academia, so that kind of set me up. So I was trying to go faculty, but I couldn't publish, so I had to make my own way and figure stuff out in some regard. And I got some help from other faculties there. I finished the PhD, got the PhD. Then I luckily got into UCLA because, again, I continued the gift for gab, talking to people and showing them my perception of intelligence, and they were able to help me out. You know, it takes a village. So that's kind of been my story. And then that's how I got to UCLA. UCLA has been wonderful. I've grown tremendously since joining UCLA, research-wise, as a person, just going through the motions of life, growing up. I've learned quite a bit. So that's kind of the story of how I got to UCLA. Kind of long-winded, but.
No, that was totally fine. And it's interesting, some of the things you mentioned there. So first you said you moved from Nigeria when you were 12. And so that goes into, just being Black across diaspora. So you're now going, like you said, that's super interesting about the class listings.
Yeah.
But I kind of get it because I work in graduate admissions. And so when I look at mark sheets and degree statements, degree certificates from certain schools, it'll say this student is ranked number 36 out of 136.
Yeah, exactly.
So I get that, but in my everyday life, even though I see that, I never take it into stance, into idea. But then to America, it's kind of backwards. And I can recognize that because me growing up, I wasn't a gifted and talented kid. But when I got to middle school, as you said, middle school is kind of like that period where you figure out who you are.
Man, it is a painful life.
Middle school. And I remember, so I go to therapy every Wednesday. I talk to my therapist. And we recognize that my depression that I experienced started in middle school. And I don't know why it started, but when you just think about how evil kids are and how much that you have to try to figure out in that little window, it's so much. And in the same way, when I was in high school, I was not a good student in high school. I was naturally smart, but my thing was like, I played 4 sports. I was in drama. I was in choir. And it's helped me now because I'm the most well-rounded person. It's like,
exactly.
I always tell people, because people will look at me and be like, Eugene is such a nerd. And I'd be like, hey, when I was 18, I ran a 4.540. Like, let's not get it.
Oh, man. That's funny. That, it's crazy you said that because, and that's in the U.S., and I think it also Nigeria, right? I think all over the world, the puberty stage of life is a stage that is focused primarily on social currency.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much the end all be all. That's why if you look at teenagers, they don't see anything further than the perception of what they are. You can't blame them. It's actually kind of hard coded into, I would say, us as humans, as animals, because animals show the same thing. That's the age at which they start to determine hierarchy. Lions, alpha, and beta males, and the females. Gorillas do the same thing. Most animal classes go through these phases. The ones that can do it. So it's crazy because they squeeze it into such a small time zone, and then high school is like the continuation of it. But it's interesting how you said the same thing. It's almost like everything is, elementary school, everybody's on equal ground. Everybody there's differences. Some people are weird. The word weird is used a lot. Oh, you're weird. Your head is shaped weird, which is funny because as a child, everybody's head is shaped weird. Nobody's head is regular. Everybody's head is shaped weird. It's just yours just stick out a little bit more than this person. So I find it funny when I look back and now look at these kids talking about it. I'm like, oh, y'all have weird shaped heads. You just you see his more. It's funny because you see the interaction when you grow up. You start seeing like, this is what I was tripping over last time. It's funny. It's hilarious. But at that time when you're in the mix, it's the world to you, right? There's nothing greater than being cool and popular. And it's a dangerous conundrum. And almost, it's funny because it kind of continues on when you get older, but money replaces all that stuff. It becomes a financial thing. Yeah. So some people never grow out of it. Actually, most of us actually still stay in that realm. We just learn how to deal with it.
Social media plays into that a lot because social media allows a lot of us to live out fantasies that we never would have been able to live out. I just think about even like the influencer part of Instagram. I think it's great. Like a lot of people will say, oh, this person, they're just selling this product, yada, yada, yada. But as you said, the currency, there's always currency. It just changes.
It changes, yeah.
Like it goes from a cultural currency or like a popularity to like an actual currency of how much you have.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting how in America and I guess abroad also in certain ways that money is basically the end all be all. If you have the access to money, it's like people are going to treat you better. People will give you opportunities and stuff like that. And that's kind of where I feel like we go wrong in society. Because
It's unfortunate, right? But this, as you were saying, right? You made the statement that it's in other parts. Actually, it's other parts of the world, but the entire world is the exact same way.
Mm-hmm.
And I see it this way. Right? I see it in this fashion. The entire world is infatuated with power and money, and more so power. Money is a vehicle for power, and those who understand that actually are the ones that are in power, right? The people who understand that money is a tool. Huh?
They say that again. That's the word.
No. So I pretty much said essentially, money is a vehicle for power, and those that understand it are the ones that are in power, yes. Right? So in order for you to, if you're infatuated with the chase to get money, then when you get it, you don't use it for what it's meant to be used for. You put money as the goal instead of money as a tool to get you to the goal, mm-hmm. Right? When you put money as a tool, then you see things from a different perspective, and that's essentially what, if we go back to generational wealth, the word wealth, that's what wealth is, in my opinion, is the ability to understand that money is used as a tool to give you control, power, influence. That's what money is for, and that's why people were seeking it in the first place. People it's been generations, from Egyptians to those before that. Mm-hmm. Power was always sought in the form of some kind of whatever influence, whether it was from the Stone Age, whether it's being the biggest person, the strongest, the survivor, the one that can kill the most, and then going to more of skilled, who was an artisan, who can do X, Y, Z, to who can create, who's the engineer, to now who is the influencer, who can get the most money, X, Y, Z. It's always about power, right? So the world is kind of ran that way. And it's always been ran that way since the beginning of time. Now, and money in this case, money is the one that it gives power. So, but the way it happens is the classes, the reason why we have social classes is because each social class, in my opinion, sees money differently, right? At the bottom, we see money as the goal. Mm-hmm. At the top, you see money as a tool. So in between is the range, right? It varies between those two extremes. So the more you understand and again, it goes back to that book, the 48 Laws of Power. When you understand that money is a vehicle, right, or a tool to get the power, then your goals are switched, your approach is changed, and then now you can essentially enact change in the way that's more effective, in my opinion. It is hard to get, but it's hard. It's definitely difficult to come out that mindset, because even myself, I'll be lying if I say I don't try to pursue money. But I think I begin to understand more and more that my pursuit of more financial capabilities is because I want a specific lifestyle. Yeah. Right. That's more conducive to what I envision myself having. So that's and I need to understand that much better so that I can be able to focus my energy. Because again, that comes to energy. Focus my energy on things I need to focus on.
I think that. So I was listening to a Dave Chappelle interview one time on Inside the Actors Studio. And he was saying, he was talking about him leaving Comedy Central and Chappelle's show. And he said when he was younger, his dad told him, pick a number. And his dad was basically like, if the job goes beyond that number, if the stakes get too high, you can be good at that number. And he said for him, that number was 50 million, because that was at the time where he saw the Comedy Central people, they were no longer laughing with him. They were laughing at him.
Yeah.
Social commentary that he was giving about racism, they were taking it and trying to pervert it into another way. And he was just like, I got enough money. And I think that's the thing, is because our entire life is political. Literally, if we go back to the end of time, as you were talking about the Stone Age and stuff like this, and you go through building families, just having a large family at one time was a case of power.
Yes, it was.
Families started becoming tribes and societies and empires, etc. But even today, when your wife is pregnant, she goes to the doctor and she has her baby, the first thing they do is they create a Social Security card. You're put down, you're given your Social Security number, you're immediately put into the government system. Your wife goes to the doctor the first time, they ask you about insurance. They ask you, how are you going to pay for these things? And so everything is political. Everything is about power. And that goes into a simple conversation about campaigning. As you said, those who are in power know that money is a tool to either gain more power or maintain power. And that's why we have so many private interests and so many rich people just giving it to campaigns because they're like, I need to control my power. Why do people think that billionaires didn't lose any money during the pandemic, but the poorest 80% of the country or whatever the number is all lost money? It's because those who are in power know that money is a tool, and those who don't look at money as that vehicle. And and so I think that's great how you explain that. But and it's one of those conversations that could go on forever. Like, what is power? How do we maintain power? How do we keep it? How do we get it? And a lot of people will just put themselves in a situation. And I always think about how power reacts in low-income communities, specifically for Black and brown people. Because people think that, and I think society in America, they look at just like crime in Black communities, poverty, births out of wedlock, whatever, and they say, look at these people. They're savages, they're animals, whatever they're calling us these days. But the fact of the matter is because those who are in power have used money as, number one, a symbol of what you need to get power. And so now you have people at the bottom like, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get power. And it reminds me of something that happens in Louisiana all the time, but specifically Donald Glover brought attention to it on the show Atlanta, and he had the episode called Robbing Season. And it was the holidays, and when the holidays comes, a lot of crime happens. When tax season comes, a lot of crime happens. So from that November to April period, you have a lot of crime. But the reason you have a lot of crime is because you have a lot of people showing a lot of money, showing a lot of gifts or whatever it is. And it gives people the opportunity. It's like, I don't have it, so I want it. Because they've created this goal for us to maintain. And like you said, we all want to have a semblance of some money. Like, my thing is, I always tell my fiance, I don't have to be like super wealthy or rich. I just want to be comfortable enough to do whatever I want to do when I want to do it. And that doesn't mean I'm going to wake up every single day and say, oh, let's travel to Paris, sweetheart. Like, no, that's not me. But I do want to be able to say, you know what? I had a long 9 months of teaching this year. Let's go on a vacation, babe. Like, wherever that place is, But a lot of people look at money as just like, I need money because I have to have the biggest house or the biggest car. And I'm just like, I love my Jeep. It gets me from point A to point B. I get to take the top off and have the wind blow through my hair. It's like, that's it. That's all I need. I don't need
no. It's a thing about unfortunately people change, and that's the thing. The one thing that's constant in life is change, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody stays the same. If you did stay the same, it's the bad thing, and you would probably die out, because if you don't change, you don't move, you don't progress, you'll be left behind. So change is necessary. Change is a requirement in life in general. Now, with that change comes understanding or misunderstanding, right? It goes both ways. So I think the idea of of a lifestyle, like, for instance, back me right now at 30 is not the same as I was at 25. And I wasn't the same at 25 as I was at 20. And I wasn't the same as 20 as I was at 15. So, some of the goals will stay, but things will change and you will adapt. And I think that's one of the things that we need to understand, is that don't be afraid to pursue. That's why I say put your best foot forward. Don't be afraid to pursue what you want to pursue now, because inevitably everything works for the greater good of you if you do things right. So I think with the idea of chasing money, it's hard for people to understand. I think at a young age, and a lot of young guys are getting it quickly, so they don't get a chance to kind of digest what is the money as a tool, but they digest money as a goal. And I think eventually that will change as we continue to move forward with our education of youth and our expansion of role models that they can see, who they can learn from and see things from.
So I'm listening to you, and obviously, like you said, you're 30, but at 30 years old, you seem to be a man of like astounding wisdom. I have to give you some credit for that, first of all. But in giving you that credit, I would like to ask you, like, with that wisdom, what would you like to see in your life and in this country, like over the next 10 years or so? Because the thing is, as going back to it, you're an engineer. You look at obstacles, you look at problems, and you're trying to figure out a solution. You're trying to figure out what can I do. Now I understand. So one thing is you have a family and you have your own personal individual goals. And just as we mentioned previously, your own personal and individual goals can be impacted by the things that are going on around you. So over these next 10 years, where would you like to see your life in this country grow?
Yeah, okay, that's a good question. First, let me start off by saying, I thank you again for the kind words of wisdom and all that stuff. But I don't even consider myself a man of wisdom. I just consider myself a man of suffering. So those who suffer have a lot of stories. So, you know, that's kind of how I see myself in some sense. But thank you. In the sense of what I would like to see, I think it goes back to the idea of mutual respect. That's essentially what I hope to see from as far as progress goes in this country, because I understand that the ideas of overall peace and overall lack of contention and that stuff is actually in the most crude words a pipe dream. It doesn't exist. It's not possible. Just like perfection is not possible. There's no such thing, right? There's always a compromise. There's always a give and take. So I think in some sense, mutual respect, what that does is that allows for us to at least have a rule book or a playing field that we can come together and then we can discuss our differences and then come to a consensus or compromise or whatever the case may be. That's essentially what I would like to see. My contribution to that is to hopefully try to increase the number of African Americans who are going to become people of value, not successful, but people of value. Because a person of value is able to enact change and make impacts on a grander scale than somebody who's chasing success. So I more so say chase value. So my goal is to try and increase the number of engineers, Black engineers, who are problem solvers and thinkers, and that can help change society. That's my goal.
And so I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was actually going to be the next place I was going to, because of course you came to my attention through Black Engineering Faculty Speaks, and I looked at the video of all of these Black people who have reached a semblance of success through their life's work. But one key factor has continued to be, just because I've gotten this PhD doesn't mean that I have achieved the respect or the equity that I deserve. But I'm also here as a vessel to try to help, the next generation of not just Black engineers, but Black students be able to reach their goals as positive thinkers and just people that do good, people that are just in society. And when I think about that, and I think about how you just said about increasing that respect in your classrooms, in your jobs, how do you want those people to? How can I want to make sure I word this correctly. In your job, and whether that be in industry or faculty, when you give back to those people, what exactly do you want those people to take from you? Because you're saying you want to increase respect and you want people to think value, but as a person that's also in the classroom, we know that it can be tenuous because there's just so many factors that are outside of our control, but that we have to also work against.
Yeah. So I would say if I was to pick something that I want my students to take away from me, would be a couple of things, but I'll try and keep it very short in the sense of I would like for them to take away first and foremost how to persevere.
Yes.
Again, I've been blessed that that's a talent of mine. I would say I like to call it, I never used to call it talent, but I acknowledge it as a talent now. The ability to persevere is very necessary because you will go through hardships, you will go through tough times, you will meet people that don't like you, but you have to be able to persevere and deal with that stuff. That's number one. The next thing I wanted to do is persevering for perseverance sake is a waste of time. You have to also know how to adapt. So persevering and adaptation is necessary. That's the second thing. Because in order to if you persevere, you have to be able to enact change, or you have to change yourself to be able to adjust the situation. So perseverance and adaptation. The final thing I wanted to take is the ability to critically think and problem solve. Those three things combined, I think, will set people apart. And again, I want to give that primarily to the Black community, the Black kids, but I also want to give in the same sense, because I will give that's what I want to give the Black community, but I also want to share empathy or help cultivate empathy in the non-Black community, because those two are intertwined. So my goal over the next 10, 20, 50 years is to essentially cultivate the capabilities of the Black youth and the Black students in general, but also at the same time to cultivate empathy within those Black students and within the non-Black students as well, so that we can have that mutual respect. So that's the essential goal.
And I think that's perfect. And like, that's actually a good way for us to close, by giving a charge to the next generation and to the listeners of the podcast, but also being able to detail how you got there and why you want to do these things. There's something that you said in your Twitter bio that I think goes perfectly here. The greatest insights come from the questions we ask that are left unanswered. And I'm hoping that I didn't ask any questions, because I all my questions, like, they got unanswered, but if I did, we're going to pick that up the next time.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So, like, for all the listeners, this is Dr. Chukwuebuka Nweke.
Yep.
Trying to say that right. Postdoctoral fellow at UCLA. It was so great having you on the show.
Thank you, Eugene. I appreciated the opportunity, and I'm very happy to be the first. And I hope this blows up and you use this platform to essentially change the world.
I hope so too. And as I say on my radio show, I'm going to say the same thing here, guys. Don't hurt your brother, help your brother. When you help your sister, you help yourselves. And this is Eugene signing off, y'all. See y'all on the next episode.